This is what I think. I have a feeling that I am not the only Black woman who agrees. So I want to talk about the relationship between white women and Black women. And this is for educational purposes. Now, I've sat in a number of times on conversations, especially on Clubhouse, where we've tried to kind of get into what's the problem? What is it? What is the issue between white women and Black women? Why can't we seem to establish a sisterhood that sticks? And a lot of times people try to simplify the question with it's about white women liking Black men. But it's really not that, is it? It's a lot more than that. Let's start with confidence. How many times when watching, like, say, an episode, I'm a pop culture girl, so how many times watching an episode of Real Housewives with white women where they want to show that they mean business or that they are really confident, do they put on Black girl mannerisms? Suddenly it's all about real talk and girlfriend and finger snapping and neck rolling. How many times have we seen that? I used to say, jokingly, that Bethany Frankel was the first Black housewife because she would do all that stuff and, and she danced and all that other stuff, right? I remember when the season of New York, when Avila Drescher was going to walk the catwalk and Heather Thompson, I can't remember Heather's last name, I think it's Thompson, for Heather's fashion show. And she told Avila to dig down, she needs confidence, girl, confidence, dig down and find your inner Black woman. And Avila was like, white women are confident too. And she said that, and it wasn't until she said that I thought, yeah, how? How does that show up en masse? Like, what is their lane? What does that I've seen it in individual white women, how they can be confident without either putting on masculinity or Black womanhood. But it's rare, really rare. It's happening a little bit more often now, like you see a little bit more. But I remember like watching a podcast. Oh my gosh, her name is Nedra. I'm going to have to put her name in. Nedra Tawwab. Anyway, she's a psychologist. And she wrote a book about setting boundaries. And she was on this podcast, and the podcaster was all Black girled up, braided, half up, half down hair, cornrowed on the side, big gold jewelry, all the mannerisms and all that stuff. And Nedra is sitting there in her suit, and she's talking about boundaries in a way that I recognize and understand, that I didn't necessarily recognize and understand when the people talking about boundaries were white women. I saw in Nedra like a complete comfortability in talking about her boundaries, very matter of fact, no drama, no need for any extra hand gestures, just, if you come up against my boundary, I'm going to tell you this, and then that's what's going to happen. And I recognize that because you know what? As a person who has finally learned to have boundaries and how to defend them, I feel no interior need to pretend that like I'm uncomfortable with that. Now that I've found freedom, I feel no need to fake like I'm in chains. I do it, but like I said, I was socialized in some ways white. And I do notice that for white women, a lot of times, there's an almost apologeticness that comes with setting a boundary and defending it. Whether they actually feel it or not, I don't know. But I do see that the discomfort is played. Now, this person who was doing the podcast, her podcast is about confidence for women. And as I said, all Black girled up. If you look at her promotional materials, even the whole like rapper stance poses that she'd take. And I remember her from the podcast that she used to do with her husband when she looked nothing like that. She just looked like a regular white woman. And now suddenly that she's doing a podcast about helping women experience or embrace confidence, she's using Black women's aesthetics to cosplay that confidence. You know, I have my theories as to why that happens. I don't believe that in society there really is a lane for white women when it comes to confidence. When it comes to displaying confidence, when it comes to setting a boundary and standing on it. I don't think there's a lane for them. I think that it's a really good way to get iced out of social groups. I think it's a really good way to pat it on the head by men and sent back to the kids' table. I don't think that there is a lane in which white women are generally taken seriously when they're laying down their boundaries. And so they have to dress up in other people's costumes in order to show that they mean business. Now, I don't know how deep that confidence work actually goes for most white women. You know, I have seen occasionally, you know, white women that I see, you know, I consider Brene Brown a confident woman. And I don't see that she puts on either a male aesthetic or a Black woman aesthetic necessarily. She may dip into the vernacular from time to time, but to me it kind of feels natural in the sense of the way the vernacular kind of starts to sync up amongst friends. So that's when we're talking about confidence. And if we go into the Angel versus Caitlyn thing that happened at the championship playoff game, whatever the heck, when, you know, Caitlyn had been doing this and to other Black women, other players, and the press ate it up. They loved it. They were like, oh, she's got swag and blah, 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 blah. Angel does the same thing. Same gesture. And suddenly she's a classless POS. She has no class. How dare she? Blah, 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 blah. That's because we are so uncomfortable with the idea of white women just showing up as themselves confident, that when Black women show up confident as themselves, as not the costume that the white woman was putting on that she was getting credit for, but as their regular selves, the original and not the copy, suddenly there's a problem. And it's one of classlessness, it's one of disrespect, etc., etc., etc. Now, I will say that in individual situations, when I'm dealing with white men and I lay down a boundary, I'm very often, whether they like it or not, whether they get mad or not, whether they throw a tantrum or not, there's respect. It's respect for an opponent, if nothing else. Yeah, sometimes there's a tantrum, but usually there's some respect, where a white woman could come right behind me and have a similar issue and be sent on her way. It's interesting that white women, as a rule, don't seem to have a lane that is theirs through which they show